Yeah, we are live now, Wilson. If you wanna play the video, yeah.
Well, welcome to our RIEOnLIFE talks. During 2020, 2021, and 2022, the RIEOnLIFE has been talking to educational authorities from different parts of Brazil and outside. And our main concern has been digital education and pandemic. Well, for our talk this afternoon, we have two special guests from Stockholm University, Sweden, Daniel Nilsson and Sidney Pereira. Well, nice meeting you guys and welcome to our talk. I'd like to invite you to talk about yourself, your studies, and your career. Sidney, I'm curious to know a little bit about you. How did you get to Sweden and how is your studies? Talk a little bit about yourself and your professional studies over there.
Okay. Do you want me to talk in English or in Portuguese now? Because
English.
In English. Okay, fine. Hello, everyone. My name is Sidney. I'm originally from Brazil, but I'm living in Sweden quite a while ago, almost 5 years. I graduated in journalism. I have a master in marketing, and now next week I'm gonna have a master in education at the Stockholm University here in Sweden. And I come to Sweden because I decided to move from Brazil and relationships and work and so on. So that's why I came to Sweden. And I also have a background in the event productions here in Sweden. I'm one of the producers at the TEDx Stockholm. Thank you.
Daniel, could you please talk a little bit about yourself and your studies over there?
Yes, of course. First of all, thank you for having me. It's going to be very nice to be with you this afternoon. So my name is Daniel. I'm a master's student at Stockholm University. I'm studying international and comparative education. I think it's really interesting to learn about education and education systems all over the world. I'm especially interested in quality issues, quality, educational leadership, education politics, issues about organization, primarily for primary school and also preschool education. My bachelor's degree was in preschool education, so that's especially interesting to me. But yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, welcome you all. We are very happy to have you two guys with us this afternoon. I know that in Sweden it's at night already. We're going to divide our talk today in two parts. First, we're going to have a presentation, and then we have some questions, and then we open questions for who is following us this afternoon. It's up to you guys.
Yeah, okay. Can you release the presentation? Ok, eu vou começar a falar em português agora. Na verdade, eu e o Daniel, a gente vai falar português e inglês. Eu irei falar mais português porque a gente vai trabalhar com acessibilidade, então terá português e inglês simultaneamente. Eu e o Daniel estaremos falando sobre os impactos do Covid na educação aqui na Suécia, como que foi essa transição, e quais foram as decisões da Suécia. Para quem acompanhou aí do Brasil, eu recebi muitas perguntas antes sobre como é que foi na Suécia, porque a gente teve um approach um tanto quanto, a palavra em português, diferente dos outros países, porque a maioria dos países fecharam todas as escolas, a Suécia não, mas a gente vai explicar isso já já. Então, só para dar um overview do que vai acontecer, vocês sempre terão inglês de um lado, português do outro. O Daniel vai falar primeiro sempre em inglês e eu vou falar em português. Aqui nesse slide você tem um overview, então nós temos a introdução, falaremos do sistema sueco para explicar um pouco a diferença entre Brasil e Suécia, como que a gente se organizou com o Covid aqui, a educação, como é que foi a aprendizagem online, o apoio das agências governamentais às instituições de ensino, a cooperação entre o Estado e a universidade, se teve ou não teve, que alguns países tiveram isso, a gente vai discutir um pouquinho, o papel da família e o efeito da pandemia e as lições aprendidas. Vamos para começar. Daniel, can I start you talking about the Swedish system of pre-COVID situation, please?
Sure, I will. So the first thing on our list is the independent expert agencies, and this is quite different within the Swedish society compared to other countries. So while other countries may have a minister in the government deciding a lot about the area they're responsible for, we have independent expert agencies. So for example, when we talk about the public health decisions and tackling the COVID situation, the government needs to listen to the experts in the public health agency. And this is very important to explain the reasons for why Sweden has taken an approach to COVID very different than many other countries has done. We'll get back to this a bit later, but it's important to know that we have independent expert agencies in charge of a lot of things. We also have a fairly decentralized education system. So the national parliament, of course, decides the law. The government decides on the curricula. It's the same for everyone in Sweden. But it's the 290 municipalities who's in charge of financing education, making sure that education is done in accordance with the Education Act and the curriculum decided by the national level. And also we have privately run but publicly funded private schools as well in addition to this. So there's a lot of power at the bottom and a lot of different actors involved. Sweden is a fairly digitalized country and was that even going into the pandemic, and that has of course increased now during the pandemic as well, because the entire society and the education sector needed to shift as well to digital tools and online learning to some extent. So, but we were, even before the pandemic, quite far ahead in the digitalization of the society and education. Of course, differing between different places, but in general, that's the case. Regarding the student educational attainment and knowledge going into the pandemic, we were in this situation of, if we look at the PISA test, international studies, increasing averages, but also increasing disparities. So for students with rich parents, with high education, large incomes, the non-immigrant families have higher chances of educational attainment and higher grades, and compared to their opposites. And these differences have been increasing over the last period of time. Yeah.
Okay. Agora eu faço a parte em português. É um resumo do que o Daniel apresentou. O sistema sueco ele é um pouco diferente de muitos países. Para começar, as agências aqui especializadas elas são independentes. As decisões elas são feitas de forma autônoma. O parlamento não interfere nas agências. Existe um diálogo, mas eles são independentes na forma de decisão. E as decisões durante o Covid elas foram muito baseadas em questões, estudos científicos. Elas não foram apenas emocional. Todo mundo sabe que a pandemia pegou todos os países de um jeito bem complicado, e a gente acabou tomando decisões na urgência. Aqui na Suécia o diálogo foi um pouco diferente, por isso que a gente é considerado um dos países que teve um approach com relação ao Covid um pouco distinto de outros países até questionáveis, né? O sistema de ensino também é totalmente descentralizado. A gente tem algumas escolas privadas aqui na Suécia, mas a relação é um pouco diferente comparado às escolas privadas no Brasil. Por exemplo, se eu posso falar porque sou do Brasil e vivo na Suécia, aqui quando o aluno vai para a escola privada, o governo também paga uma parte dos estudos, porque faz parte da política pública daqui. O país é um país muito digitalizado, já era muito digitalizado, e aí, quando a gente entrou na pandemia, nesse processo a gente ficou muito mais digitalizado. A Suécia é conhecida um dos países que está virando cash free, sem dinheiro, né? É tudo muito digital, né? A digitalização está pegando todas as áreas e isso tem aumentado. Durante a pandemia, e aí a gente compara um pouco antes pré-Covid, aí, quando o Covid começou a afetar, a gente estava com uma média crescente dentro de PISA e outros exames internacionais, isso estava mudando, e aí a gente percebeu que a disparidade também começou a aumentar, principalmente com os pais, famílias que os pais vêm de educação acadêmica, ou têm uma boa economia, ou grupos de imigrantes que vivem na Suécia. Então essas disparidades começaram a aumentar também, e foi muito exacerbada durante a pandemia. E a gente vai discutir isso um pouquinho mais para frente. Daniel?
Yes, so if we talk a little bit about how the Swedish society approached COVID-19 and education, the government and the Minister of Education was very clear early on to say that we should keep schools open as much as possible. That was the general direction. They were very clear to the Swedish society and also all the Swedish education organizers, parents, kids, throughout the entire process. But of course, that's impossible. You know, you have to sometimes close schools or be prepared to do that. So they made some law changes in the beginning to allow for online learning. And they have actually removed that again now, because the pandemic situation in Sweden has been very calm for quite a long period of time. So it was allowed to shift to online learning for basic and upper secondary education for a period, but now it's removed again. So they really think it's better to do education for younger people on site and not online. So we've had some periods of general school closures. So the Public Health Agency has said to the government that in order to reduce the spread of the disease, we think that you need to close all upper secondary schools and also all higher and adult education and shift that to online for a certain period of time. So they, all the time, they make some kind of judgment. How much is this going to affect this, reduce the spread of the infection, versus how much is it going to impact the students' learning negatively. And when it's a big spread in the society, they may close them down, and when it's a lower spread, they might open them up. So that has been the case. And in the next slide, we'll talk more about compulsory education, basic education.
Okay. Basicamente, quando a gente começou a lidar com o Covid aqui na Suécia, uma das falas meio geral dentro do governo é que as escolas deveriam se manter abertas o máximo possível, né? Por muitas questões. Uma delas, como isso afetaria o desenvolvimento das crianças, como ter uma criança em casa afetaria também o trabalho dos pais. Todas as discussões fez parte desse contexto sueco, então teve essa tentativa de manter as escolas abertas o maior tempo possível. Porém, algumas vezes foi necessário fechar algumas escolas. Então, para isso, teve que ter uma lei criada para poder permitir o aprendizado online, porque não se tinha na Suécia. Essa lei ela entrou em vigor por conta do Covid, e agora ela está sendo revogada também para voltar ao normal, mas é uma lei que pode voltar dependendo da situação de Covid futura, que a gente, depois de uma vez com Covid, a gente não sabe como será o futuro, então essa lei entrou e saiu. E aí a gente teve uma outra diferença que, durante os planejamentos, teve uma discussão muito grande com relação a como diminuir a questão do vírus na sociedade, e aí acabou se decidindo que o ensino médio e o ensino superior seriam os espaços que não teriam aulas presenciais e seriam online. Eu e o Daniel, por exemplo, a gente está terminando um master essa semana, né, finalizando o nosso mestrado, e o curso foi totalmente online, porque a gente começou junto com a pandemia e está terminando junto com a pandemia, espero que termine mesmo a pandemia. Então essas decisões foram tomadas visando a diminuição de contágio do vírus, né? É isso. E aí a gente vai discutir um pouco mais as questões nos próximos slides também.
So, even though the goal for the government and the education was to keep schools open as much as possible, there have been school closures for compulsory education as well, but they have not been mandated for the entire country at the same time. It has been decided locally instead for two major reasons. And the first one is teacher shortage. So because teachers and everyone in the society, if they have the slightest symptoms that could be the virus, they have to stay at home. They can't go to work. Or if the kids have some symptoms, they have to stay at home as well with their parents if it's young kids. And if this happens at one school for many teachers at the same time, it might be difficult to find substitute teachers to uphold the teaching and learning on site. So this might be one reason for why compulsory education has closed for some period of time in a particular school. And then, of course, we have a COVID outbreak. If there's a big spread of the disease in a particular school or in particular parts or grades or levels within the school building, they might decide to shift to the online learning for a period of time. And this has not been decided generally by the principals. It's been decided by the education organizer, by the principals, leaders, in collaboration and cooperation and dialogue with the regional the regional doctor for disease prevention. So those are the two major reasons for when this has happened. And the public agency called Statistics Sweden checked the development over time and for how many weeks students in general had been on online learning. And for compulsory education, we can see a slight increase over time. So in the beginning, it was very little, very minimal, and as time went by, it was generally a little bit more for the students. And some reason for that is maybe that they have had a chance to listen and learn from upper secondary education, how they can do it, and also to feel more secure in how they can do it in a way that affects the quality of education as little as possible. While for upper secondary education, it was most in the beginning and then a little bit less throughout the year. But of course, in the winter time, it's been more for all the years. But again, the main difference here is compulsory education not mandated from the government, upper secondary education mandated from the government for the entire country.
Quando a gente fez essa passagem para o ensino online, algumas razões para a gente poder fechar ou não fechar a escola, elas foram levadas em consideração. Uma delas é a questão de escassez de professores, né? Quando os professores ficavam doentes, você não tinha como substituir, é um dos casos, por exemplo. Ou se por acaso algum dos alunos ficassem doente, toda a turma também acabava tendo que se isolar por um tempo. Isso são as recomendações que vinham também do Ministério da Saúde da Suécia, né? Isso sempre foi dialogado junto com a sociedade e com as escolas, né? Quando a gente começou a pandemia, teve uma diferença importante aqui, a gente vê com relação ao ensino básico, fundamental e ao ensino médio. A decisão ela foi feita diferente. Para o ensino médio, a gente começou a ter ensino online praticamente desde o início da pandemia, e isso foi diminuindo mais para o final da pandemia, até porque também a vacina começou a ser aplicada também no grupo mais jovem, então isso foi acabando diminuindo um pouco mais. No ensino fundamental, isso foi o inverso. Como se não se tinha muita experiência com o ensino online ainda, e tinha a preocupação de como fazer com que as crianças pudessem ter educação de qualidade, eles continuaram tendo aula normal, com exceção quando você tinha surto de Covid na escola, o professor doente que tomava as decisões. E aí, conforme foi avançando os anos com a pandemia, a gente aprendeu muita coisa com o ensino médio e começou a se aplicar no ensino fundamental. E aí a gente começou a ter uma diferença, que o ensino médio começou a ter mais aula presencial e o ensino fundamental começou a ter um pouco mais de aula online. Então teve essa troca de experiência entre os dois grupos e a gente vai discutir um pouco mais nos próximos slides.
Okay, so again, let's talk a bit about those agencies, expert agencies. I mentioned the Public Health Agency before, I mentioned Statistics Sweden, but there are also other agencies that was involved in supporting the education organizers throughout the pandemic. And the National Agency for Education in Sweden, which is the biggest one, got a task from the government to facilitate learning between education providers and support them. So they have done that by, for example, organizing digital conferences where people who are in charge of education locally, both the municipality ones and also the private ones, could gather together, discuss, listen and learn from each other, to help each other out, because it's a new situation. It's difficult for them to know how to deal with something that they haven't encountered before, that is quite large scale. And they've also disseminated good examples, shared, this is what you can think about, this is what you can do. We also have some agencies that are oriented towards research, and one of them has done some kind of research quite early on, summarizing the findings at the time about online learning and how you can do it as a teacher in a way as good as possible. So these kind of both practical support, but also research-based support to the education area in Sweden has been done. And also the final thing here, when you have been on online learning for a longer period of time, it might be difficult to organize the coming back to on-campus education. It's a shift, and to do that in a way that feels safe for the teachers, for the students. So also in spreading, possible ways of doing that in a good way as possible has been the support from the agencies.
Com relação ao apoio das agências governamentais, a gente teve um diálogo muito grande. Começou com o Ministério da Saúde, que é bem respeitado na Suécia, as decisões eram bem individualizadas nesse sentido. Aí a gente tem a Central de Estatística Sueca, que baseia em dados para ajudar nas decisões também. E aí o Ministério da Educação. Essas três agências, elas trabalharam independentes e elas também se comunicaram para poder tomar as decisões e dar suporte para os provedores de educação aqui na Suécia. O Ministério da Educação, ele foi responsável por facilitar o processo, né, ajudar as escolas e os professores a entender como é fazer essa transição de um sistema para o outro, de discutir com os pares, de troca de experiências, como se ajudar, como compartilhar conhecimentos científicos. Novamente, eu acho que é importante salientar que aqui na Suécia teve muita discussão na questão de decisão com base em dados científicos, não apenas nos feelings das pessoas, né? E aí as agências de pesquisa ajudaram muitos professores a planejarem a aula, a trabalhar com essas questões online. E aí você teve todo esse trabalho das agências separadas, que também acabaram dando um suporte bem grande para os professores e para as escolas, tanto na questão prática como nas questões burocráticas de transição. E aí, mais para o final, uma outra coisa importante é que depois de ir para a questão online, fazer a volta não é tão simples, né? Não é volta todo mundo para a escola porque a gente está em outro ritmo, etc. Então, as agências também são responsáveis por dar suporte nessa transição de voltar para as aulas seguras nas escolas, dar suporte aos professores, criar um ambiente que você se sente seguro em dar aula novamente e que o vírus não está mais presente. Então, teve muito esse processo de suporte psicológico também em todas essas questões.
Okay, so I was also asked in the preparation for today to look at if there has been any cooperation between the state and universities in tackling the pandemic and situation and how to do the education. And I've been searching, but I haven't found anything or heard anything about any structured cooperation. There might have been some local cooperation. I don't know that happens, that some of these 290 municipal education organizers or some of the private ones might have cooperated with the university locally. I don't know of any such examples, but it happens during other circumstances, so it might have happened here as well. But one of the potential reasons for why I can't find anything or haven't heard anything about this is because of the agencies. Again, some of the public agencies in Sweden are tasked with conducting research and with providing the research evidence to help the education organizers out. We also have the other agencies doing more evaluative work. We have the inspectorate, school inspectorate, that has done an audit and an inspection of how schools have done its work. So schools, education providers, the state organizes this in different ways, in other ways than relying on universities to do the job. And this is one of the reasons why I think that I can't find these kind of examples.
Com relação à cooperação do Estado com as universidades na Suécia, a gente não tem evidências claras dessa cooperação. Primeiro porque as agências elas fazem um trabalho individual de pesquisa e avaliar todos os processos, então eles podem ter um approach direto com determinada instituição, escola, individualizado, mas que isso não necessariamente seja a prática geral. E aí, devido como eles se organizam de forma diferente, então não é possível encontrar essa relação de cooperação entre os dois processos, o Estado e a universidade. Basicamente isso. E a gente vai discutir um pouco mais outras questões nos próximos slides também.
Okay, so about the role of the family. Since school closures in Sweden has mainly been for 16 to 19-year-olds for upper secondary education, the role of the family or for the parents have been generally limited, because if you have kids who are that old, they can take care of themselves. They can attend school by themselves from home. There was a study done where they compared Sweden to other European countries, and one of the things they find there is that Swedish students spent less time studying with parents compared to the other 6 or 7 European countries in the study, and it explains itself that the older you are, the less reliant are you on your parents to help you. But a thing that became quite clear is that kids or children, to parents who have lower education, lower income, maybe live more narrowly in the apartments, many people in a small space are affected more negatively by the online learning. And we will, during the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about how different education organizers in Sweden has worked to try to limit the negative effects for these groups who are particularly vulnerable or negatively affected by the online learning.
Ok, o papel da família aqui na Suécia foi um pouco diferente da maioria dos lugares. Primeiro que as escolas que foram fechadas é a geração de 16 a 19 anos, que é o ensino médio e o pessoal que já está ensino profissionalizante indo para a universidade, e é uma geração, é um grupo etário mais independente. Então a relação do pai com o ensino das crianças foi um pouco diferente, porque as crianças do ensino fundamental ainda estavam indo para as escolas, né? E aí teve um outro estudo que comparou essa questão da relação dos pais, o ensino das crianças durante a pandemia, e aí comparou a Suécia com os países europeus, e a Suécia foi o país no qual os pais passaram menos tempo com as crianças comparado aos outros países. Aí, claro, eu colocando um pouquinho da minha fala, precisa colocar no contexto a realidade da Suécia é diferente da realidade dos outros países. Eu entendo as comparações porque estudei, sou mestrado em educação, e a gente faz comparação, mas tem que sempre lembrar do contexto. A Suécia tratou a pandemia bem diferente dos outros países aqui na Europa, e foi uma das questões que até as fronteiras com alguns países próximos aqui também se fecharam em alguns momentos por uma questão de decisões políticas nos outros países, né? Mas um fator importante de ressaltar aqui, e aí depois a gente pode até comparar com o Brasil, é que na Suécia a gente teve, quando comparou o ensino e a aprendizagem das crianças aqui na Suécia, se percebeu que crianças com famílias com economia um pouco diferente dos outros países, a economia mais afetada, ou com pais que têm um estudo um pouco abaixo da média, essas crianças foram muito mais afetadas durante a pandemia. Então, isso afetou muito mais o rendimento dessas crianças comparado com as outras famílias mais estruturadas economicamente ou questões dos pais serem mais estudados, né? Isso é interessante para comparar depois com os outros países e saber como que essas questões foram tratadas também.
All right, so let's talk about the effects of the pandemic and also the lessons learned. Of course, it's still going on. Not all evaluations and research is finished, but this is what we know right now. So the National Agency for Education made an evaluation and a report where they asked the principals. They sent out a survey to principals all over Sweden about what they think about the learning that took place during the pandemic. And the principals reported that in mathematics, Swedish, physical exercise, and the arts subjects, there are indications that less learning than usual, than when they're not online, has taken place. And also when we look at the grades, they seem to be stable, like the grades for the final year in compulsory education. And this might sound a little bit strange, because if the students have learned less, then the grades should also be lower, right? But this is an indication of that it has been harder for teachers to assess the students' knowledges and skills when they have been on online learning in the cases that they have done that. And also one important reason that is spelled out in these reports is because of the national exams that was canceled for a few times throughout the pandemic. And when the teachers don't have the national exams or national tests to guide their grading and only have their own, their own tasks, it might be more difficult for them to do the grading and assessment of the students. Another effect is reduced health among students, and this is for several reasons. One of them is for if we talk about the kids who have been attending school on campus for the most time, it might be due to stress and worry about what's going to happen if my grandma and grandpa get the disease. These kind of worries, what's going to happen in society, these kind of insecurities that I feel all of us has felt during periods of the pandemic. But then for the teenagers who have been staying at home, it's of course social isolation and also less physical exercise, because you don't have the routine maybe that you usually have by going to school. Maybe you can't attend the sports after school because it's a close contact sport, so you can't do it because of the pandemic. You get into bad habits. Maybe you attend the lessons from your computer in your bed and not really live an active life. So reduced health is one of the more clearer effects of the pandemic. And one of the lessons learned is the compensatory perspective. And by compensatory perspective, I mean that in the Swedish Education Act, they say that all kids should have equal opportunity, no matter their background, of attaining education and learning in school. And as I mentioned briefly before, is that some students who of low-income parents, parents who don't have that much education, get affected more by the pandemic or homeschooling situation. So some ways that education organizers in Sweden have been tackling this is through targeted information and also targeted support. So 2 examples here. The first one is absence. When in the beginning of pandemic, when it was a new disease and everyone was extra worried, we saw in many parts of Sweden a large absence of students. Parents kept their kids home from school, even though they were required to attend school, because they were worried about the disease. And this was mostly immigrant parents who did that. So the education organizers had to approach this situation and tackle this in ways that they aren't used to doing, to get these kids to come back to school and assure the parents that they're going to be all right and it's needed for their education. And also regarding home situation, if you live very narrowly in an apartment, or maybe you don't have stable internet connection or access to a computer at home, or things like that, they have made, many education organizers have made exemptions from the studying at home part. So even though the government has mandated for upper secondary education that no schooling is to take place in the schools, you have to do it online. Or even if most of the school of compulsory education is done at home, they have been allowed or been doing some exemptions so that the students who have the most negative effects of not being in place at school has still been invited to be at school and attend live lectures in smaller groups with the teachers. So that's 2 ways that they have done the compensatory thing. And this is very important to remember, that some students are more affected than others in a negative way. We'll finish on a positive note, which is, of course, increased skills in technology, both for teachers, for students, for principals, for everyone. So even though it was generally quite good at digitalization in Sweden before, it really has increased, of course, throughout the pandemic.
Okay. Os efeitos da pandemia, as lições que a gente teve foram diversas, aqui a gente está ressaltando algumas delas. A primeira é que teve foi feito um estudo para entender com os professores como é que eles sentiram as questões da pandemia e a relação das disciplinas, e se identificou que os professores de matemática, da língua sueca, educação física e de artes foram os que mais identificaram perda no aprendizado, né? E aí é interessante notar que as notas estavam estáveis, porém a gente não estava sendo aplicado o teste nacional, que é mais ou menos acho que é a Prova Brasil, que chama no Brasil Prova Brasil, e Enem. Aqui na Suécia também existe um, só que foram suspensas pela questão do Covid, não dava para reunir muita gente, então não se tinha como mensurar o aprendizado dos alunos pelo governo, e aí os professores tiveram que fazer a aplicação das provas por si só, e aí teve essa dificuldade de aplicar a prova e entender como é que estavam sendo as notas, né? E aí a gente percebeu que teve um impacto na saúde dos alunos muito grande. Primeiro, a diminuição da questão, o isolamento social, você perde contato, e aí você tem crianças preocupadas com a questão dos avós que são mais velhos, dos pais, questão de saúde, afim, etc. E essas coisas começaram a afetar os alunos também, o rendimento deles, né? E aí na Suécia a gente teve algumas ações compensatórias para poder trabalhar com isso. Uma delas foi a questão de ausência, então o governo e as escolas começaram a observar e tentar trazer para a escola os alunos que estavam ficando em casa, porque muitos pais tomavam a decisão de manter os alunos em casa com medo da pandemia, do vírus, etc. E aí as escolas foram tentando se aproximar de evitar com que a situação acontecesse e demonstrar que era um lugar seguro para estar indo, mesmo com a pandemia, que as medidas estavam sendo tomadas, né? Uma outra questão com relação ao problema de estruturas. Muitas pessoas podem ter problema com internet, ou computador, ou algumas crianças que têm um pouco mais de dificuldade de aprendizado, e aí se teve algumas escolas que tomaram algumas decisões mais individualizadas, de esses alunos não precisavam estar em casa, eles iam para a escola para poder aprender durante as aulas em campus, na escola, no espaço físico. No espaço físico. E algumas outras escolas permitiram que alguns alunos fizessem as aulas online. Então, essas ações elas foram meio individualizadas e direcionadas para cada caso, né? Porque a gente sabe que a pandemia afetou as pessoas diferentes, para cada criança foi de um jeito, e aí precisava tomar algumas ações um pouco mais individualizadas, e ficou a nível das instituições fazerem isso. Essa foi toda a apresentação. Daniel, you want to say something else?
Yeah, these are the sources used. Some are available in English, some have English summaries, and a few of them only are in Swedish, unfortunately. But yeah, if you want to find out more, here's the information. And thank you for listening.
Obrigado.
Good. Very nice hearing from you guys. Some questions are popping up here. We'll pick up 2 or 3 of them so you can discuss. If I got right, when you were speaking, you told me that during the pandemic, Sweden had to bring up some laws because there were laws for online learning. Okay, and the question that is coming up here that can use is after the pandemic. How do you see education, especially online education? Because maybe Sidney's told that this law probably will be, we had to go back to the pandemic, before pandemic. So how do you see the online learning from now on?
Yeah, so I think that online learning has a place in education, but maybe it's difficult to do it in a good way for younger students, for younger kids, for kids in compulsory education, and especially when you take into account their different possibilities of attending education from home, or different access to help at home. So they did actually just recently removed the law, or the changes in the law that allowed for compulsory education to be done online. So the government, at least, is very doesn't think that it's a good idea to do online education in terms of lessons for young kids, or for kids in compulsory education. But I think that to use education platforms, to use different kinds of organizing tools for the students, and also for the teachers when they plan their lessons, and for contact and cooperation with parents. That is definitely something that is important, and that the government in Sweden is very keen on happening and keeping to develop. Yeah.
Are there any investment in research? Because we were speaking about research, about learning and all of this. What kind of investment in research, especially for how to train teachers, working on ecosystem and technology? How can you develop and prepare teachers for this new moment, especially after the pandemic?
I mean, the universities and research institutes and the agencies, all of the education-related agencies in Sweden are, of course, very keen on learning from what we are experiencing and what we have experienced with the pandemic, and seeing what worked well, what didn't work well, how can we use the lessons learned in a good way for the future. So there's a lot of things going on, and the things I reported now about the effects, they may change. There may be additions, of course, as this progresses. I haven't seen, but I'm not sure, but I haven't seen any targeted additional financing from the government to research this, but they have been giving out to the agencies. They've been giving tasks to evaluate and to follow up and to engage with these issues, of course. But the additional research funding from the government has been more targeted towards handling the pandemic from a broader sense of, from a broader viewpoint for the society in general, and not specifically the education sector.
Yeah, I can add one thing there, because my research as in my master is focused on technology education, but in higher education. So I'm looking for higher education in Brazil, but also I'm following here in Sweden. We do have at the university a few courses focused on digital literacy or digital skills for teachers inside of the program. I just checked this week and I said, oh, maybe I could do that and see what's good or not. But also we have inside the Stockholm University and Karolinska Institute here in Sweden, we have a department focused on technology enhanced learning, or to support teachers at the university how to use technology or better use resource, technological resource inside of education. I cannot say about the Compulsory education, but I can tell that at the university level, there is a focus in developing those skills as well inside of the teacher program and training also.
Here in Brazil, the teachers had to face a lot of challenge. It was difficulty. We know that. How was with the teachers over there in Sweden, and how they managed to get that and overcome all the obstacles during this period?
Of course, it's been a lot of worry among the teachers about the situation, about their own health, because, you know, when the government says teaching should be as much as possible within the school, then you are in a situation where you have 30, 35 kids in perhaps a tiny classroom without good ventilation and things like that. And then there has been a lot of teacher worry about, okay, in the rest of the society, everyone is very spread apart, you know, but this is not possible in our little classroom. So there has been a lot of worry about among teachers about what's going to happen to them. Maybe they have some relative that is especially prone to diseases or things like that. But then, you know, with regards to digitalization and doing more online for primarily then for upper secondary education teachers, they've been required to do so. I mean, they haven't had any choice but to adapt and do it. And in these evaluations that has been done, it says that teachers and students and families have been very quick in adapting and trying to adapt. And of course, they don't always succeed. It doesn't always turn out that great when doing a lesson online and achieving learning for the students, but they have been doing it with engagement and flexibility throughout the period. But then again, I think Sweden has been or was quite well prepared in doing this, because the digital infrastructure is quite well built out, both in schools and also generally in society. People generally have access to fast internet at home, computer at home, and these kind of other preconditions for attending lessons online. And also in schools, it's quite common that for upper secondary education students, all of them has one computer each when attending, you know, school. They get to borrow a computer for the 3 years they attend upper secondary education, so they have access to the tools already. And for lower grades, it might be the two pupils share one device. So generally quite well built out. So I think that has been good. Sweden has had a good starting position when it comes to the tools and technology available.
Sidney, you want to say something?
The one thing that I became very surprised when I moved to Sweden, I remember because I have some schools around here, and you see all students come out with a small bag with a computer, and then I thought everybody buy a computer. No, the school have the computer for the students. That's very interesting because before the pandemic, it was already something in Sweden. Digitalization is part of the society. Literacy in ability in digital world is needed here in Sweden as well, and it's a field that's growing more and more, and that they was preparing long ago for that. So you see students with the computer going to the school or tablets, and this is part of the school structure. It's not something that I have to buy to my kids, but the school has it for kids. That's very good for the situation here in Sweden. And I remember when I was doing my interviews in Brazil, a lot of students in the higher education level just quit the studies because they could not have the internet or a computer to keep doing during the pandemic. So the context is pretty much different when you compare Sweden to Brazil in that extent.
Well, guys, we're coming to an end. Time is almost 1 hour. Good. We're so happy to have you guys here. Thank for the contributions in the name of the RIEOnLIFE group. We thank to all. Agradecer a todos que estão aqui nos acompanhando em português para promover a acessibilidade, Sidney, todos que estão aqui, né, que estão acompanhando, né, eu acho que o tempo foi bem bacana. We'd like to invite you to keep in contact, keep in touch, let's share. I think this is a time to share information, share experience, lessons. We got lessons that we somehow we learned during this period of time, and I'm so happy to see that we can maybe from this experience start in comparing. I'm very curious about comparative education. Good, very nice. Okay, so thank you very much. Thank everybody who still following us. And see you next Thursday. Okay, goodbye. Thank you, Daniel, Sidney. Thank you for accepting the invitation. And good to see you guys.
Thank you.
Good to see you too. Thank you.